The ballroom's opulent chandeliers glimmered above as diplomats from across the galaxy mingled in a sea of extravagant attire and hushed conversations. Leora's fingers tightened around the hilt of her concealed blade, her gaze fixed on the man at the center of attention, David Bennett. His calm, commanding presence was undeniable as he spoke passionately about peace and unity among the species. Leora, cloaked in her guise as a diplomatic aide, felt a surge of determination. Her mission was clear: eliminate David Bennett to cripple the human peace efforts. Yet, as she wove through the crowd, her steps silent and calculated, doubt gnawed at her resolve. David's voice carried over the murmurs. "We must find common ground," he said, his tone firm but hopeful. "Our future depends on it." His words were met with nods and murmurs of agreement, even from those known to be skeptical of his ideals. As she approached, Leora observed David more closely. His sincerity was disarming, his eyes reflecting a genuine concern for all present. This wasn't the cold, calculating enemy she had been led to believe. Her Xandarian superiors had painted a picture of a ruthless manipulator, but here stood a man whose very essence radiated empathy. "Leora, could you assist me with these documents?" one of the aides asked, snapping her from her thoughts. She nodded, taking the data pads and moving to David's side. The scent of polished wood and the faint hum of alien technology filled the air as she placed the documents on the table before him. "Thank you, Leora," David said, offering her a warm smile. It was a simple gesture, but it stirred something within her, a flicker of doubt. As the evening progressed, Leora found herself drawn into conversations with other diplomats, each interaction revealing more about David's efforts and the genuine impact he had made. Her blade, once a comforting weight at her side, now felt like a burden. In a secluded corner of the ballroom, Leora's communication device vibrated softly. She glanced around before slipping into a shadowed alcove to read the message from her Xandarian commander. Asterisk. Proceed with the mission. No delays. Asterisk. Her heart pounded as she reread the command. She looked back at David, now engaged in a spirited discussion with a group of alien envoys. His passion was evident, his dedication unwavering. The mission had always been clear: eliminate the threat, ensure Xandarian dominance. But as she stood there, hidden in the shadows, Leora's resolve wavered. Could she truly kill this man who embodied the very peace she had been taught to despise? A hand on her shoulder jolted her from her thoughts. It was David. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern etched across his features. Leora nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes, just overwhelmed by the atmosphere, I suppose." David's gaze softened. "It can be a lot to take in. But remember, every small action we take here can lead to something greater." His words echoed in her mind as he returned to the gathering. Leora's internal conflict intensified. She had been trained to be an emotionless weapon, yet here she was, grappling with feelings she didn't understand. The night wore on, the tension within Leora growing with each passing moment. The mission demanded precision and detachment, yet her heart, inexplicably, urged compassion. As the crowd began to disperse, she knew her decision couldn't be delayed much longer. In the quiet aftermath of the event, Leora stood alone, staring at the blade hidden beneath her robes. The choice before her was stark: complete her mission and uphold her duty, or embrace the flicker of humanity that David had ignited within her. The weight of her decision pressed down on her, and as the final guests departed, Leora knew that whatever path she chose would irrevocably alter the course of her life, and the fate of the galaxy. The shrill alarm pierced the tranquil morning, jolting Leora awake. She leapt from her cot, her hand instinctively reaching for the blade under her pillow. The Xandarian communication device blinked red, signaling an urgent message. Heart pounding, she tapped the screen to reveal the orders. Asterisk. Proceed with the mission. Immediate execution required. Asterisk. Leora's breath caught in her throat. The weight of her duty pressed down on her, but her resolve wavered. David's kind eyes and genuine words from the night before haunted her. She couldn't ignore the warmth his presence brought into her cold, calculated world. She dressed quickly, her movements mechanical, trying to suppress the turmoil within. The bustling human city outside her window contrasted starkly with her silent room. The scent of rain on metal and the hum of distant machinery filled the air as she stepped into the day. At the embassy, the atmosphere was tense but hopeful. Diplomats and aides moved with purpose, their conversations a blend of languages and tones. Leora found David in his office, surrounded by holographic displays of various diplomatic documents and maps. "Good morning, Leora," David greeted her with a smile, his eyes twinkling with the same warmth that had disarmed her before. "Good morning, David," she replied, forcing a smile. She handed him the reports she had prepared, their hands brushing briefly. The contact sent a jolt through her, a reminder of the humanity she was beginning to embrace. David glanced at the reports, nodding appreciatively. "Excellent work as always. I've scheduled a meeting with the Xandarian delegation later today. I'd like you to be there." Leora's heart skipped a beat. Attending the meeting meant being close to her own kind while pretending to be loyal to David. The duality of her existence was becoming unbearable. "Of course," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. The meeting room was a blend of human and Xandarian aesthetics, a testament to the tenuous alliance they were attempting to forge. David stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding yet inviting. The Xandarian delegates entered, their imposing figures and sharp features a stark contrast to David's gentle demeanor. The discussion began with formalities, but soon delved into heated debates over territorial disputes and trade agreements. Leora watched David navigate the conversation with skill, his calm and rational arguments slowly wearing down the Xandarian resistance. At a particularly tense moment, one of the Xandarian delegates, Commander Tarek, fixed his gaze on Leora. "You girl," he barked, his tone dripping with disdain. "What is your opinion on this matter?" Leora's mind raced. She had to maintain her cover while also subtly supporting David's position. "I believe that compromise is essential for lasting peace," she said carefully. "Both sides must be willing to make concessions." Tarek's eyes narrowed, but he nodded grudgingly. "Very well." The meeting continued, but the atmosphere was slightly less hostile. As it concluded, David thanked the delegates and turned to Leora. "You handled that well," he said quietly. "I'm glad to have you by my side." His words warmed her, but the guilt gnawed at her insides. How could she continue to deceive him when he trusted her so completely? That evening, Leora found herself alone in the embassy garden, the scent of night-blooming flowers mingling with the crisp air. David joined her, his presence a comforting weight. "Leora, I know this mission is difficult," he began, his voice gentle. "But I want you to know that your efforts are making a difference. Together, we can create a future where all species can coexist peacefully." Tears welled in Leora's eyes. She had been sent to kill this man, yet here he was, speaking of unity and hope. Her internal conflict reached a breaking point. Could she really betray her own people to protect the very person she was sent to eliminate? As the night deepened, Leora knew her decision couldn't be postponed any longer. The next move she made would define her fate, and the fate of the galaxy. The tension in her heart mirrored the delicate balance of peace and war hanging over them. She was caught between duty and emotion, and the choice she faced was tearing her apart. The embassy shook with the force of the explosion. Leora was thrown against the wall, her ears ringing and vision blurred. She scrambled to her feet, her assassin instincts kicking in as she scanned the smoky room for threats. The acrid scent of burning electronics filled the air, mixing with the cries of the injured. "David!" she shouted, her voice barely audible over the chaos. She found him pinned under a collapsed beam, his face pale but determined. With a surge of strength, she lifted the beam just enough to drag him free. He gasped, clutching his side where blood seeped through his shirt. "We need to get out of here," Leora said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She half carried, half dragged him towards the emergency exit, her senses on high alert. Outside, the city was in turmoil. Hover vehicles sped by, their sirens wailing. Civilians and diplomats alike ran in all directions, their faces masks of fear. Leora spotted a group of armed Zendarian soldiers advancing towards the embassy. Her heart sank. Her people had launched the attack. "Leora, this way," David whispered, pointing towards a narrow alley. She guided him through the maze of back streets, her mind racing. Why had the Zendarians attacked? Was it a test of her loyalty, or had they deemed her mission a failure? They found temporary refuge in an abandoned warehouse. Leora secured the doors and checked David's wound. "It's not too deep," she said, tearing a strip from her cloak to bandage his side. "You'll be fine." David's eyes were filled with pain, but also something else, trust. "Leora, thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." Her heart ached at his words. She had been sent to kill him, yet here she was, protecting him with her life. The lines between duty and emotion had never been so blurred. "We need to contact the council," David said, his voice strained. "They need to know what's happening." Leora nodded. "I'll find a way." She hesitated, then added, "Stay hidden. I'll be back." She slipped out into the night, the city's chaos a stark contrast to the calm resolve she felt inside. Her mission had changed. She wasn't just protecting David, she was fighting for a chance at peace. She moved through the shadows, avoiding patrols and gathering information. The Zendarians were rounding up humans, their actions brutal and unyielding. In a hidden corner of the city, she found an old communications hub. The technology was outdated, but functional. She sent a coded message to the Human Council, warning them of the attack and providing coordinates for a safe extraction. Returning to the warehouse, she found David sitting against the wall, his face pale but determined. "Did you get through?" he asked. She nodded. "Help is on the way. We just need to hold on a bit longer." David reached for her hand, his grip weak but warm. "Leora, why are you doing this? You don't have to risk your life for me." She looked into his eyes, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. "Because it's the right thing to do. You've shown me that there's more to life than duty and orders. I believe in your vision of peace, and I can't stand by and let it be destroyed." Tears glistened in David's eyes. "Thank you, Leora. Together, we can make a difference." As dawn approached, the sounds of conflict grew closer. Leora stood guard, her senses sharp. She knew the Zendarians would come for them, and she was ready. Her blade was no longer a tool of assassination, but a weapon for protection. The door burst open, and Leora moved with lethal grace, defending David with every ounce of strength she had. The fight was fierce, but she was fueled by a newfound purpose. In the midst of the battle, she saw a glimmer of hope. The human extraction team had arrived. With the Zendarians momentarily distracted, Leora and David made their escape. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: their fight for peace had only just begun. The bond they had forged in the fires of conflict would guide them through the trials ahead, and together, they would strive to change the galaxy. The roar of engines and the blinding lights of the extraction team's hovercrafts shattered the pre-dawn silence. Leora's heart pounded as she stood guard over David, ready to face whatever came next. The thrum of the approaching vessels grew louder, and she tightened her grip on her blade, prepared for the final confrontation. "Stay behind me," she instructed David, her voice resolute. The door to their makeshift refuge burst open, and armed soldiers poured in. For a moment, Leora's heart stopped. Were these friend or foe? "Commander Leora, stand down!" a familiar voice ordered. It was Captain Merrick, a Zendarian officer known for his ruthlessness. His piercing eyes scanned the room, locking onto her with a mix of fury and disbelief. "You've betrayed us." Leora's blade wavered, but she held her ground. "I've made a choice, Merrick. This conflict isn't what we need. There's a better way." Marek's face twisted with anger. "You're a traitor to your people. Step aside, or we'll take you down with him." The tension in the room was palpable. David's hand on her shoulder grounded her, reminding her of the stakes. "We can end this without more bloodshed," David said, his voice steady despite the danger. Merrick sneered. "Idealistic human. You think she can save you?" Leora's resolve hardened. This isn't about saving one life. It's about changing the future for all of us. She stepped forward, blocking Marek's path. If you want him, you'll have to go through me. Before Marek could respond, the extraction team burst through the back entrance, their uniforms bearing the insignia of the Human Peace Council. They quickly assessed the situation, weapons trained on the Xandarians. Drop your weapons! The extraction team leader commanded. We're here to secure the ambassador. Marek hesitated, his soldiers looking to him for guidance. The room was a powder keg, seconds away from igniting. Leora glanced at David, who met her eyes with unwavering trust. She took a deep breath, stepping into the middle of the standoff. Enough! She shouted, her voice echoing in the confined space. This fighting solves nothing. Look around you, destruction, pain, loss. Is this the legacy we want to leave? The silence was deafening. Marek's expression shifted, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. The extraction team held their position, awaiting the next move. David stepped beside Leora, his voice calm but firm. We have an opportunity here to change course. To start anew. Let's not waste it. Marek's gaze hardened, but the fire in his eyes dimmed. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. You've chosen your path, Leora. There's no going back for you. She nodded. I know. But it's a path towards something better. With a nod from Marek, the Xandarian soldiers retreated, their departure a reluctant acknowledgement of Leora's choice. The extraction team moved swiftly, securing David and Leora and ushering them into the waiting hovercraft. As the craft ascended, Leora watched the city below, the embers of conflict still glowing but tempered by a new hope. David leaned closer, his voice a soft murmur in the noisy cabin. You did it. You made them see reason. Leora's heart swelled with a mix of relief and apprehension. It's only the beginning. There's so much more to do. David's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. We'll do it together. One step at a time. The horizon glowed with the first light of dawn, a symbol of the new beginnings they were fighting for. Leora looked ahead, determination etched in her features. She had turned her back on everything she had known, but in doing so, she had found a purpose worth fighting for. Their journey was just starting, but with every mile they traveled, they carried the promise of a future where unity and peace were more than just ideals. They were within reach. And together, they would make that future a reality. As the hovercraft sped towards safety, Leora and David shared a moment of silent resolve, their bonds strengthened by the trials they had overcome. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was a path they would walk together, forging a new destiny for themselves and the galaxy.